And we know that all things work together for good to them that love God, to them who are the called according to his purpose. For whom he did foreknow, he also did predestinate to be conformed to the image of his Son, that he might be the firstborn among many brethren. Moreover, whom he did predestinate, them he also called, and whom he called, them he also justified, and whom he justified, them he also glorified. What shall we say then to these things? If God be for us, who can be against us? He that spared not his own Son, but delivered him up for us all, how shall he not with him also freely give us all things? Who shall lay anything to the charge of God's elect? It is God that justifieth. Who is he that condemneth? It is Christ that died, yea, rather that is risen, who is even at the right hand of God, who also maketh intercession for us. Who shall separate us from the love of Christ? Shall tribulation, or distress, or persecution, or famine, or nakedness, or peril, or sword? As it is written, for thy sake we are killed all the day long. We are accounted as sheep for the slaughter. Nay, in all these things we are more than conquerors through him that loved us. The Apostle Paul here is penning to a group of Christians in Rome who they themselves have faced persecution. Not only persecution from the government, but persecution from their family, from the religious people in their area, that the religious Jews and the others in that area were persecuting them. And the point in this is that things do not always go the way that we wish they would. I imagine many of the Christians in Rome, when they received Christ, they didn't expect to face great persecution. But we realize that the same God who called us is the God who keeps us. My wife's life verse is Philippians 1:6, and it says this, being confident of this very thing, that he who hath begun a good work in you will perform it to the day of Jesus Christ. The God who called you is the God who's performing in your life for you. The God who called you is the God who keeps you. That's what the Apostle Paul was trying to explain to these Christians here. And he actually makes the statement. He says, what shall we say then? If God be for us, who can be against us? What are we going to say? How are we going to answer when difficulties come? He gives us a list. He says tribulation, that's vexation of the mind. Boy, how often our mind is vexed within us and we just feel a burden, a weight upon us. He mentions distress, that's anguish of body or calamity, misery. And how often we feel misery at times in our life, whether it be emotional or physical. Think of some from our class right now that are going through a physical battle. Think of some that are going through a very deep spiritual battle, an emotional battle, but distress, persecution. That's when others treat you the wrong way. That's when others afflict you. Famine. You say, well, what's that? That's want of provisions. When you don't have what you think you need. That's a lack, if you will. Maybe there's not enough food in the pantry. There's not enough not enough money in the bank at the end of the month. Nakedness. Nakedness, you say, what is that? Well, it's not necessarily being unclothed. It's being stripped down of that to which we are accustomed. Going without, if you will. Many times being stripped down of dignity, being stripped down of our own pride and having to be humbled. That's nakedness. Peril, what is that? Physical danger. And he even goes so far as to say the sword. He's talking to Christians who eventually, many of them were martyred. They were killed for their Christian faith. And the conclusion the Apostle Paul brings is this. Understanding all this, what shall we say then? No, things aren't always going to turn out as you planned. In fact, many times they turn out the opposite of the way that you and I planned because God's ways are not our ways. But we understand that nothing can separate us from the love of God. And so, as Christians, in the good times of life, we rejoice in his love for us. In the bad times of life, we're comforted by his love for us. And at the end of our time, we are embraced by the fullness of that love. I don't know about you. I want to enjoy the love of God through this life. We love you, folks. We'll see you tonight at 7. Don't forget, just a few weeks and our fall program is coming soon apace. We look forward to growing with you.